Good evening and welcome to The Square. Tonight is a timely discussion. It's the 32nd Viewers Edition, where we'll solely focus not on a couple of topics like we always do in Viewers Edition, but a specific topic, very timely, very pressing in Kigali, which is the Kigali public transport service, public transport system. And there's a saying that goes, a developed country is not where the rich drive cars, sorry, the poor drive cars, it's where the rich actually use public transport. And tonight we are going to talk about this issue that has been plaguing Kigali city commuters for a long time, especially since the 2013 sort of regulation was put in place. We're going to look at some of the issues right now that are ongoing, such as congestion, long queues at bus terminals, bus lanes that people are calling for more dedicated bus lanes, and that sort of thing. Of course, some of these services were exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, but still we are here tonight to discuss what some of the issues are, and of course, in the spirit of the Square resident panelists, have solution-oriented viewpoints and solutions put forward as part of our discussion to this issue. My name is Dana Mpisi, host of The Square. I'm joined as always on Viewers Edition solely by the resident panelists, and I'll start with you, Berna. Great to have you on the show tonight.
Thank you, Dana.
Great. Also joining us is Charles Haba. Great to have you on the show.
Dana, how are you?
Good.
Good.
I know we usually have issues of the week that we want to highlight. Are there some you'd like to highlight before we jump in?
One thing that two things I'm particularly excited about. One is the creation of the ministry in charge of public investments.
Yes.
The government of Rwanda has heavily invested in various sectors, so it's high time that they took it extremely serious. The second one is I'm also super excited about the increment of salaries for teachers, and the subsequent huge injection into their SACCO, Umwarimu SACCO. The stubborn me thinks it's been instigated by the huge recruitment of hundreds of teachers from Zimbabwe.
Yes. I saw that as well. Very interesting. Berna, any highlights?
I think it's good to see the investment going into education. It's a bold move. Increasing salaries when you have inflation going up, ideally that's not advised. So it's bold, but also you have to look at the economic environment. We are operating in the resource envelope, even for government, is quite limited. So if you see any increment at this point, it really points to the bigger vision. Hopefully, it will go a long way in terms of addressing the quality of education. But again, we know from several studies that it is not just money that retain teachers. Beyond that, it's their working conditions. It's how do you raise the profile of the profession. How do you get young people to get into teaching and keep there and really grow.
Yeah, the retention.
Yes. So we will need more reforms really to get where we want to be in terms of improving the quality of education.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we are here, like I say to our viewers, please hold on to your thoughts and your comments. I will be reading them out later on in the show, and you can comment using #TheSquareRW. So the first topic, we'll just kick off with the elephant in the room, is the public service transport in Kigali run like a monopoly. And one of the key issues, the public transport service system in Kigali, has been accused of it's run by as a monopoly. There are just specifically three bus operators that ply all the routes within the city, and they're allocated to specific routes. And of course, this decision was made in a bid to regulate transportation to Kigali residents and ensure they have very professional quality transport, and the buses are really meant to go where they're meant to go. However, the question is is it time to include more buses? The regulation of these buses, can it be less strict? So these are some of the issues I want us to tackle in the beginning, as the beginning part of this discussion. And these buses, I think we all know them. It's Royal Express, Kigali Bus Service, as well as Jali, former RFTC. Charles, I'll kick off with you on your thoughts on this, whether Kigali service public bus operators, if the system is really run as a monopoly.
I think it's a bit of a catch-22 because globally public transport is more of a service than a business. If you look at it critically, if you are in it purely for the money, then the government would not have to give you incentives, but the government has to give you incentives on fuel and taxes and what have you, import duty, VAT and what have you, such that you can be encouraged to be able to offer that service. Now, in other economies where the governments can afford, they actually physically invest in the buses, and the trains would belong to the metropolitan agencies and what have you. In a country like ours, where we have not been the very best at running our own enterprises, to my earlier point about the Ministry of Investments, you've had entities like Onatracom that went bust, and that used to cover a very big gap, and it's not necessarily lucrative. So a pure businessman would opt for something else. So now, if the guy has decided to invest in public transport, he had better be supported. One of the ways in which you support them is through incentives. The other way in which you support them is through protection against competition or unnecessary competition. Now, usually the logical flow is, if I'm going to protect you against competition, you have to up your game and show that you have capacity to deploy hundreds of buses, for that matter, since we're talking about public transport. I'm in the real estate world. I'll tell you that if we're letting a shopping center and we're saying we're not going to do any other coffee shop, any other pharmacy, any other supermarket, any other, let's say one player for any of those very specialized businesses, we'll tell you, you also have to up your game. Be able to operate 24 hours for argument's sake. Be able to have a wide range of medicines. Be able to, to satisfy this demand such that you don't give us a reason to bring in other players. I think the monopoly is not bad. It's just that the few players that have been who are actually in the market have not been able to satisfy that demand or to justify the reason for which they have been protected. Yeah.
Interesting take. I know Brenna disagrees to a certain point on this based on our previous conversations, but something you said I'd like us to come back on. In looking at the issues of what's happening with this Kigali, in the city, the public transport woes, it's also the populations have grown, exponentially. Before even the COVID-19 pandemic. So when you say they don't have the capacity to deal with the sort of like the boom in populations, that's something to consider. One, two, most of these bus operators in the recent weeks when we're dealing with these issues say they actually have the capacity. There are some buses, that they've ordered in and so forth and so on. But then you also have City of Kigali officials saying that there's also a deficit of over 200 buses. So I think, what the media is getting is I don't think it's a sort of singular message on what the key issue is. So people are grasping at straws trying to understand what is the real issue. But I'm glad to see government officials have taken it head on. Again, I think for the upteenth time in trying to solve this issue. But, we'll get to that.
Can I speak to that point on the urbanization rate versus transport? Because that is really where the huge mismatch is. Now, the city of Kigali is extremely aggressive in terms of, pick one item, tarmac roads, right? So areas that were otherwise rural 5-10 years ago are now urban or peri-urban, just because there's a very aggressive move on making them, on putting tarmac roads. Now, what that subsequently means is that more people get to live there, get to build their houses, get to do their businesses, and the other relevant amenities, schools, hospitals, shopping, and what have you. Now, once you have a huge number of people going into a neighborhood that is not provided for by a route of maybe Royal or Jali or whoever it is, there is a serious gap that immediately comes in place. Now, one of the biggest mistakes that whether it was Rura or the city of Kigali made is to ban the other small taxis from certain routes. The option that guys have, guys who cannot afford motors, they get onto what they call taxi velos, the bikes. Now, it's not all weather, it's not extremely convenient, but should the city then reconsider bringing in those small 14-seaters to cover that gap in, should they swallow humble pie and say our rate of urbanization is faster than our public transport system. Yeah. How then do we cover that gap? And sometimes these things are just saying, the policies that we made are not matching with the times in which we are. Let's swallow humble pie and give a better service.
Because those roads, the Trejelanyes, they're specific to feeder roads.
Yes.
Not the main routes, the three.
But the feeder roads are now tarmacked.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they've led to a huge rapid growth in the number of people living in those areas.
Yeah. Right now, back to the point of the cartel monopoly, as you've mentioned some time before on the show.
I think we have to really. Okay, first of all, my reaction to what is going on. We're seeing a lot of firefighting, which is so wrong. Why are we firefighting public transport? I mean, really, why? If we're talking about creating a competitive economy, a competitive city, how can we be firefighting public transport? I think yesterday and today, suddenly there's a push, or if you have buses, we're calling out. Why was this not anticipated? Why? Do we have a shortage of transport economists? Do we have a shortage of urban planners? So there's a big disconnect. You hold Chogam, it's very successful, people can move around, and then when ordinary Rwandans have to get to work, they can't get to work. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And for me, I feel that going back to the issue of coordination and the people working in different, in different rooms and not talking to each other, you're busy constructing the roads. Nobody is worried about what is going to happen after those roads are constructed. To your point, Charlie, you have these networks now. Places are it's much quicker to assess them, they're accessible, and then suddenly you don't have, you have a problem with how to get there. Yeah? Not because there are potholes, but the roads are so good that nobody's going there, So that is a problem. Secondly, I think until we probably look at how limited access to public transport affects productivity, and to that extent really affects output, we have to take it very seriously. And I'll give you an example. For most people over the last 3 weeks or so, queuing up early morning, they can't get to work on time, so meaning they're beginning late.
They're forced to take motors which are not in their budget, within their budget.
Yes, they have to stretch, but some can't actually even take the motors. So they're getting to work very late, and it is, I couldn't get here because of transport. That is already a problem for whoever is employing them. It's affecting service. And then in the evening, people still can't go home. They can't get home on time. So look at how that affects the family setting. This mother or father cannot get home to help the kids with homework because they're, So we shouldn't just look at it as
in isolation.
Yeah, in isolation of how it affects, the economy as a whole. And this is why I get shocked that we are firefighting, really. It is a basic need to have a functioning city. Transport must work. Yeah. Now we've said so far. Again, going back to the response. when you're doing forecasts, I'm sorry, I'm going I'm talking about the economy so much, but really it's about economics, yeah? You forecast the economy is going to grow by this percentage. How is that growth, where is that growth going to come from? You know, if people cannot get to work, yeah? So again, for me, I think it goes back to the other issue that we don't like to talk about, which is the inequality, yeah? That most of us who are privileged to make decisions are not really thinking about those who are not privileged enough, because the privileged can get to work. You can drive to work. Most privileged people don't actually know there's a crisis, you know. So how do we really walk the talk around inclusion and make it our business, you know, as policymakers? Forget about, you know, the V8 that gets you to work. There are many, you know, thousands of Rwandans who have never even seen the V8, you know. Yeah, so there's that disconnect. Yeah. So in terms of solutions, I think going forward, what we really need to think about.
I want you, I like what you know, the context you've given, but I also wanted you to talk about this issue where people are decrying, you know, how do we only have 3 bus operators? How can we open it up? I wanted you to also just touch on that issue if you have, you know, solution-oriented viewpoints to that.
Unfortunately, I'm not a transport economist, and I'm not an urban planner, so I wouldn't have solutions around that, yeah? It's an issue that needs to be fixed, and I'm sure that there are resources to hire competent people to resolve the issue, yeah? But for me, I see that there are no 2 ways around it, yeah? You can't have your cake and eat it. If we say we are going to subsidize public transport, we are going to regulate it, then it becomes difficult to attract private investment. Because if it's a private investors like a free market. Yeah. You know, yeah. I am doing my numbers, I'm looking at how much I'm investing in, I'm looking at returns, you know. Yes, public transport is sensitive. You can't purely leave it to the private sector. I understand that. But it's still, you know, a decision you have to take and say, let's negotiate with the private sector and say, can we, one, we understand the investment you're making. Let's come to a middle ground, you know. Let's meet you halfway, yeah? And unfortunately, transport is not just an issue in Rwanda. Even some of these big cities, we're still having strikes around, you know, public transport. But for us, it's really paying attention to how it affects our productivity. At this point, we can't afford to have unproductive people, really. We can't.
I like that you married this issue to just, you know, the quality of living. It's not in isolation. You know, there's a sort of domino effect when it comes to service, when it comes to family, and that sort of thing. I would like us to go to the next part of the discussion.
Can I make a comment on
sure, sure.
2 points about what Bana says? And one, I want to give a life example about where the very aggressive infrastructure rollout and our beautiful roads that we've done around Chogam are not meeting the public transport sort of expectations. And I'll talk about only one item, bus stops. Just below RBA here, there used to be a huge bus park, the Kachiru bus park. Now the road is widened, the bus park is deleted, and now people have to literally stand in the middle of the road for the buses to pick and drop them. And that's not only buses, there are cabs, there are motors, there's everybody. Meanwhile, because the roads are wide and beautiful, it has increased the economic activity in the area.
I know, yeah.
But all the other guys who work in those ministries, immigration, education, and public service, and all the other guys who are around there, and RBA, and all these people who and you know, there's lots of civil servants who work around here. That taxi park was actually of a huge benefit to everybody who's around here. Now it's not there. There's not even a bus stop.
I know.
Yeah, so that's a huge problem. But I want to talk about forces of demand and supply and pricing. So if Rura has set its prices, that's not a problem because, again, as I said earlier on, public transport is more of a service than really as a business. But let that person who can afford it, and just give an example of a motor. Motor might be a choice because you want to get to where you're going quicker, or you can actually afford that motor.
Yes.
So if Royal or Jali or RFTC or whoever it is has an express or a VIP service, so be it. I've been told that some of them have asked for it around Kigali. Comfortable bus, I sit. If for argument's sake, from Remera to the city center is 200 francs, let me go to Tap and Go and buy my monthly card of 10,000 francs, if I can afford it. But I sit comfortably and I get to my bus stop on time, and I get it on time, and I alight on time. So the option, if the option is there on the upcountry trips, on the upcountry routes, you have Virunga VIP, Kigali Musanze. You even have guys who have cabs, 5 or 7 seater cabs. Kigali Gisenyi, if maybe a trip was whatever, it's maybe 1,000 francs, you'll pay double the price, but you sit comfortably. So let that room be there, such that if I can afford to pay double, but I am not yet in the Toyota Starlet class of Bana, but I still move in my public transport. And I think that would also be a fantastic solution.
I just very quickly, because I want us to also be reading tweets as we go along. We were tagged in these tweets, and I wanted us to read it out loud, because you talked about the bus stops. Anyway, we'll read it out shortly. But Charles, you mentioned something before I come to you, Brenna. You're talking about getting on time and getting into the bus, and you get somewhere on time, it leaves on time. Right now, what's happening is that a bus operator gives the conductor or the driver a certain amount that they're supposed to bring home at the end of the month, or it's deducted from their salary. So you sit in a bus, and the bus doesn't take off at 10 o'clock. It will wait for passengers to fill up. So I think this is something also worth considering, using smart tech to actually put these things in place where we can really monitor and regulate. If the bus leaves at 10, even though there are 15 people instead of 30, it leaves. But I feel like that issue is still something that's there nonetheless.
Well, someone has to cover that cost.
Yeah.
Yes.
Someone has to cover that cost of you should move when the bus is empty or not.
Yeah.
Someone has to cover that cost. Yeah. So
May I think, because it's a business, again, the private, the operators are businesses. The ones that start and leave on time should charge a premium, should be given the liberty to charge a premium.
You want to say something?
Yeah, absolutely. If you open up the market, really, the better service you provide, the more you can charge.
Yes.
Well and good.
Yes.
But again, sometimes it wouldn't work, Charlie, because ideally you want more people and the majority to have that efficient service. So the problem with the market, and this is why you need regulation, is that if you leave it just to the private sector, then still you'll get people parking their Prados and just paying the 5K that can easily get them to wherever they're going.
And that will ease congestion.
Yes, on the road a bit.
But for the person,
it will reduce pollution.
But for the persons whose income bracket is lower, what happens there?
Yeah, what happens
No, they will queue. There's something for everyone.
I want us to read one of these tweets.
It should be. We should understand, and this has happened before. Government prioritizes certain sectors and really comes in. We've seen they've done it for fuel, coming in with a subsidy because they really want to minimize the impact on prices to protect the consumer. But I feel that it should be very clear, first of all, that one, most of the transport companies were grounded for almost 2 years. And these guys had taken loans. And so they are also still struggling, really, to make ends meet. So you can't easily dictate to them terms at a point, even when fuel prices are going up. you know. So it's difficult, and this is where you again need government to come in and do something about it, you know, in public interest. Yeah.
I know government was really trying to step aside and not really get into the transport system, the transport service system. You know, it was really looking.
But do you know why?
But it was really. Can I just finish my sentence? It was looking forward to the, you know, to the market. You know, the forces of
markets
supply
are
and demand,
imperfect.
just taking over. You know, ensuring that this service. Gets to where it's supposed to be, but it seems that they're going to be, you know, they're going to be pulled back into a solution, because this issue has been plaguing us for the last, since before 2013, even though policies were put in place. But I wanted us to just quickly read a comment, that was said. Charlton, you're talking about bus stops, and if you could have this tweet on our screens. So this is with regards to the bus shelters, very beautiful bus shelters that were put forward in different parts of the city. And if you could have this on our screens, this tweet reads that from Paul Rigamba. Unfortunately, I don't know what's happening, but the tweet is for funds of extra 22 bus shelters should be used to purchase extra buses that will ensure commuters arrive to their respective places of work on time and be productive. A workforce builds an economy that can later on enjoy the entertainment with a much stronger economy. So, you know, different responses to these bus shelters that have been put across the city. We'll be reading more tweets later on. I want us to go to, and Bernard, it really touches on your point regarding, financing and investment and that sort of thing to get more buses. Charles, you're talking about the laws of supply and demand. So the issue is that there's a deficit of over 200 buses, around 271 buses, but the licenses that RURA grants are really for between 3 and 4 years. In terms of applying for a loan, if you want 100 more buses, they look at that period of which the license exists, and it's just not, banks are reluctant basically to provide financing to bus operators or transport service investors. And my question to you is, with regarding to this, what sort of suggestions do you have in terms of the financing to ensure there's more investment by bus operators, not only from a regulatory standpoint, but also from, low-cost loans or something of the sort?
Well, you see, the private sector will tell you that they're in the business of solving problems, and where they will see an opportunity, they will grab it, and if it's banks, they'll be willing to finance whatever makes sense, in terms of return, but also in terms of risk. So when they assess the risk, it's difficult. And also, we have to look at 2 years in relation to the cost of finance. You're giving someone a huge loan. Can they actually pay it in 2 years? If it doesn't make sense, then you automatically take them off, say no to them. So it's hard. Again, markets are imperfect. We know this from 2008 with the financial crisis. That's why we really had government to come in and regulate. But I think in our case, something is amiss. Yeah, something is amiss because the demand is there, the supply is there.
But there's a gap somewhere.
Yeah.
I think personally, in terms of regulation, I don't understand why the licensing to bus operators is between 3 years, less than 5 years.
Because it could go both ways.
But if you're giving someone, if I give you, you want, let's say you're, Jolly or Royal Express, and you're applying, for your, you say you have the capacity to deliver, and you want to go to the bank when you see, this urbanization explosion of sorts, and you think, maybe you forecast, but with the bank, you only have a license for 3 years. After that, they're not sure if you'll still be in this service. So I think, is it possible? It's just a question to consider. Can RURA start, considering granting longer licenses to these bus operators so they can get, the loans that they need, and in so doing, some of these forecasting on some of these issues we're seeing now can be prevented?
Well, if the market
Doesn't it come to it may come to the length, the period of the licensing?
I think it's part of it, but also if we can use construction,
as an example.
affordable housing, yes.
Yes.
The other issue that is also unresolved. At first, mortgages were at some point 5 years, 10 years. Now we're at 20 years. That's the best you can get, I think.
You can get 25-year mortgages.
25, yeah. Is that linking, have we seen more private investment in real estate for affordable housing?
I would like to believe so.
Charlie,
that's a fantastic example you've given, because when the government of Rwanda woke up in the morning and wanted to promote ICT, they waived all import duty and VAT on IT and IT-related equipment. It boosted the sector so much. When government of Rwanda wanted to boost the construction sector, the incentives that were there, they were beyond what you're saying in terms of the length of mortgages, the tenure of mortgages that's available. But now, when we are faced with a huge housing deficit, what the government has done is saying, we have an affordable housing fund. We'll do for you all your infrastructure if you're in that project. They have even taken it a notch higher and said, we are going to provide you land. The government will actually give you land that they've already expropriated. Now they're even saying we'll guarantee you offtake and buy all the houses that you've done. It's because they realize there's actually a big problem.
Yeah.
Bringing it to transport. Rwanda is fantastic when it comes to coming up with homegrown solutions. They need to tackle that bull by the horns. They say, okay, what is it that you guys need? Bring in all your buses, no import duty, no VAT. The fuel subsidy is very good. Is it enough? Probably not. Diana raises a fantastic point about the tenure of the loans in the transport sector.
The licenses.
The licenses, because that has a direct to the tenure of the loans.
Yes.
So, can you give you an 100% vehicle loan? One of the biggest issues that crippled the transport sector was the leasing products, because banks today are not too excited to give leasing products for the transport sector, because there's a huge argument that's happening with Rwanda Revenue Authority around VAT on leasing. But you'd ask yourself, any bus manufacturer, me, I'm Jali, I am RFTC, I'm Royal, why should I buy buses? I should be leasing them from the manufacturer. So we need to have this holistic approach around the very clever financing mechanism, but government needs to understand that they are in pain and give more incentives to people in that sector. And that's basically some of the things we've spoken about: cheaper loans and longer tenures and the licenses that you speak about.
And they've done it before for tourism. I don't know if you recall that some cars
still exists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They waive taxes on
import duty.
Yeah, on
and VAT as well on the service.
Yeah, on these cars.
Yes.
What are they called, Charlie?
Yeah, so the vans and the safari cars.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was done. And we've seen, at least now, there's no shortage, right? You can easily find one, isn't it?
So in a nutshell,
so you just need, I think, the different government agencies in one room. It's not just a rural issue.
But I feel like they have been in one room before. When the transport, policy in 2013 was coming in, there was RURA, there was City of Kigali, there was RTDA. There were all these relevant stakeholders involved in the transport vis-a-vis urbanization issue. But it's recurring. It's recurring. And that's what you said earlier on.
Yeah, I think it should go beyond, because right now, you see, they keep saying, ask Kigali City.
Or talk to RURA.
Yeah. Or talk to RURA, yes.
Yeah.
Talk to Kigali City. Talk to RURA. Talk to, How about the other side of incentives? You'll have RDB come in. You'll have
the Ministry of Finance.
The Ministry of Finance come in.
Yes.
You'll have Rwanda Revenue come in.
Yes.
So I feel that it shouldn't just be looked at as a Kigali City problem. And I don't think Kigali City actually has the capacity to solve that issue on their own.
On their own, yeah.
You know, and to take the lead as they're doing it right now to solve. I don't think so. Yeah.
I want us to read another tweet very quickly before we go to, the next part of the conversation. And this tweet, if you could have this on our screens, says, hello, looking around public transport system in Kigali is quite not well organized. The efficiency of public transport could be largely improved by giving priority to buses and other public vehicles on the road. Implementation of more bus lanes. So that's one tweet. We have the second tweet coming in saying only for buses, it's a continuation. And Frank goes on to say, they set a specific time for only bus movements to avoid traffic jam. By doing so, it will, fasten the movements from one stop to another. Rural Rwanda can check on this as well. We also have another tweet coming in from Kaitare, if you could also have that on our screens, who says that public transport in Rwanda should be looked at as a service more than a business, and it's rural Rwanda's responsibility to make it affordable to citizens. I really wouldn't want to be in Rura's shoes right now. I really feel for it. The pressure is real, but this issue has to be solved. Yeah. It has to be solved for once and for all. Charles, your points, to Brenna, your points, it's a recurring issue, but it has consequences on everything from service delivery to family. Did you want to say something, Charles?
Yes, I wanted to throw a comment around what Frank said around priorities for buses and bus lanes and what. So the Kigali City Master Plan provides for a bus rapid transport corridor. It's called the BRT corridor. And it was there in the 2013 master plan, and then in the new one as well. It is in there. Now, the implementation of that we have not yet seen it, probably because it's going to cost the government a lot of money to do expropriation along the lanes where the BRT corridor is supposed to land, to where the lanes are supposed to be. Now, luckily, when you're doing your construction or your planning, when you're applying for your construction permit, you will not be allowed to build along the BRT corridor because they are planning that at one point it will pass there. So that's one thing that needs to be quickened. It will address the point that Frank has raised around
the dedicated bus lanes.
Yes, that's number one. But the other thing, you see, we're talking about, you threw a figure of about 270 buses required just to narrow the gap. I think the city engineer said to solve this problem once and for all, as one was saying, we need 500 buses.
Yes.
Now, throw 500 buses into this city of ours and just see.
And mixing it with ordinary, with private transport.
No, we're setting up ourselves for doom. Now,
Lagos.
Yes, so BRT, the solution, BRT has to be quickened as soon as yesterday, and then the other one is going to be around electric buses. So I want to speak about electric buses in relation to greening the city and our pollution. Now, if you look at electric vehicles and a policy around incentives, that is supposed to come to an end within the next 1 year. All right. Within 1 year, everyone who aspires to have a car will want to be able to drive. I mean, you move from a cleaner to a receptionist to, as you grow up, the employment, whatever the first loan you want to get is a car. If this incentive for electric vehicles expires within a year, what about the one for buses that is still not yet as fluid? Remember, please link this with the fact that for buses it is not really a business; it is a service. So we really need to have a policy that is very dedicated to electric buses, because that's the future that we are going. Then subsequent to that, we talk about charging stations and the charging infrastructure and how people are incentivized to invest in that, because the entire value chain has to be in place for us to be able to narrow that gap. Yes.
Yeah, I think, and it also comes back to Bernard's point of forecasting, you know, scenario planning. You know, you're thinking 10 years ahead, and you know, greening the city, green transport is something I know, you know, the government is really looking into, but I think, you know, some of these things need to be hastened if you're trying to deal with these issues. Bernard, you want to say something?
I think if you could do an assessment so far, there's a lot going on in terms of greening, not just the city, but the country. You no longer find any shopping bags, you know, the coffee cups or the straws, they're all gone, which is good. To our earlier point, how do you link that to the other sectors of the economy? If you look at the numbers, more Rwandans are buying cars, personal cars, which are not friendly, environmental friendly. That's a problem. So how do you encourage more Rwandans, one, to use public transport, but also buy clean cars? Yeah.
Clean cars. Encourage more Rwandans to use public transport that is really not at the best right now. So that's a big question.
Which would...
And also buying green cars, they're quite expensive compared to your ordinary car. So I think those are great questions, and I really hope there's some, you know, it would be great to have a discussion on that, just to understand in terms of transportation, green transportation as well. What's in the pipeline? It's costly.
Yes, it wouldn't come cheap. It's costly, but
it's
as we've seen,
it's costly in the short term.
Yes, in the short term.
Yes,
in the short term.
Yes.
But the government has taken many bold decisions in terms of investment. They've done it for Rwandair. I think they can do it for public transport.
Public transport. Yeah.
Just give it a push.
Yeah. So we're coming towards the end of the show, and I just want us to, you know, recap on, you know, it's 1 hour is not enough time, especially since we, you know, next time we'd like to have on board our public officials to share more insights. But as concerned citizens, you know, public transport users, and, you know, who are tweeting in and whatnot, I think this issue, it deserves more time than, you know, just 1 hour. But I want us to just sort of recap and look at the solutions, you know, that we've been talking about, because we've been looking at describing, you know, alternative options. We are looking at identifying what the issues are, the long-term effects, other than just transport, that's the spillover effects on communities and society. So, you know, it's just a recap, really, Charles and Bernard. And you know, one of the things that I picked up from our conversation is how stakeholders need to be a bit more aligned in their messaging, number one, in their meetings, their, you know, solutions, ideations, really aligned, and understand that coordinated, you know, policies are very important. And so my question is to you, Charles, just, you know, recap, what are some of your recommendations on the public service transport issue in Kigali?
I've been made aware that there is a plan by the city of Kigali to provide for a dedicated bus lane during certain hours. Yeah, and I think that needs to be hastened. It's a fantastic idea. It will help around quicker movement from point A to point B. It's a fantastic idea. The second one is really to I can't overemphasize the importance of feeding more on the incentive side of things, borrowing from what we've done on the other sectors. I mean, I talked about ICT and affordable housing, but I could also talk about sports infrastructure, where government is actually very heavily investing in some of this infrastructure because they see the ripple effect on the MICE side of things. So transport, you know, you can't say we've done enough. We still need to feed the sector quite a lot. I am super excited that now we have a Ministry of Public Investment.
You really are. You've mentioned this twice on the show so far.
I hope that they can again put in money, or if, you know, relook into that sector to be able to serve it better from a public sector perspective. The last thing you want to see is a guy who put in his money staked his house and all his wealth to put into buses, and then the business goes bad, and yet the public service he's been giving is also not appreciated. It's two slaps on the face. Yeah.
Brenna?
I feel that we've seen so much progress as a country because of certain strategic decisions that have been made linked to homegrown solutions. As we continue to talk about building an inclusive country, there are some things that must remain a priority. We have to make the investment in public transport, one, as part of building an inclusive, not just city, but also country. If that means introducing another levy like we're doing for Mitwell, I think we should just do it.
I was actually going to say, while you're on the topic, that the way we dealt with community-based health insurance as a country, the dedication, the deliberateness about going about it, the long-term understanding of the need for it to be a priority, I feel the same sort of thinking could be adopted to, public service transport. And this is Kigali.
Yeah.
In the next 4 years, this issue could be happening in a secondary city, in Sanze or Karongi. So we are dealing with it as a capital, but forecasting this could be happening. If we want to be a middle income economy, this could be happening out of Kigali. So it's not just fixing it here. It's looking also.
Yeah, it's a long-term view.
Country.
Yes, it's a long-term view. It's looking at how much we lose, the unproductivity that comes with an efficient public transport. Two, you can't, you can no longer choose in terms of building an inclusive society. It has to be, otherwise it will crumble.
Absolutely.
It will crumble.
Yeah.
So the earlier we do it and make that decision and really make the investment that is needed. It will be costly at the beginning, but I think it will be worthwhile, investment. Yeah.
I'd like us to read a couple of more tweets before we close. This one is from Bob. If you could have it on our screens, he says that we also need to be realistic and focus on the functional than the beautiful. We are talking electric buses. We also want to industrialize. At what rate is our electricity generation going? Good point. Again, coordinated,
efforts. Yeah.
Efforts. You talked about that.
The last time I looked at that space, that we didn't have a very big issue. We were addressing the issue of generation. It's the issue of distribution. That needs to catch up.
We do have electricity.
Another tweet, again, also from Bob, if you could have that on our screens, is how do we capitalize on the digitization of payments to predict prime time demand and divert buses to certain routes as opposed to restricting the service providers to particular routes? Very, very, very interesting question, because we know these bus operators, they have to use those routes. They can't, change them and go on routes that they're not accustomed to. So,
but I like what he said about functional and beauty.
Yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
I think there's been too much focus on beauty, really.
Especially with the new bus stops, right? Yeah, the new bus stops are very beautiful.
Really beautiful.
And you can imagine having all these beautiful...
Our musicians should shoot videos at the bus stop.
I know.
Because there are no buses stopping at the bus stop.
And maybe we should have some coffee shops around.
But like one of our viewers said, it goes against logic. That money could have been injected into getting more buses. But anyway, I think things always happen in tandem. It's okay to put them there, but let's also deal with the transportation issues. So I'd just like to thank our viewers for tuning in. It's been great. We're hoping to have this discussion again, absolutely, as we always do on the show. It's been a recurring issue since we started the show, 5 years ago. But we would love to have this show with public officials next time. I know people are really at the drawing board during this period, trying to, you said firefight earlier on, Brenna, but really try and once and for all.
It's not the best time for public officials who are in that line to
come
appear in the limelight.
Well, I think in the interest of accountability and transparency, it is okay. I mean, you may not have all the answers, but
You're not
Yeah.
the kindest of people, Bana.
No, seriously. No, you may not have all the answers.
Any public official who does not have their house in order would shy away from you, Bana.
Yeah, and you too. So to our viewers, thank you very much for tuning in. To the people who are tweeting, please keep the conversation going using hashtag #TheSquareRW. As always, we engage even after the show, especially with different stakeholders on social media. To our partners, Uzi Collections and Bourbon Coffee, thank you for supporting The Square. Have a good night. See you again next week.
Protect your assets ahead of time against fire outbreak damages. Our fire insurance policy provides coverage for residential buildings, commercial buildings, administrative buildings, goods in stock, and